kia ora to everyone, and lovely to see you all here today. Ko Megan Courtney tako ingoa, no Ngāti Ahau, ko whakatū o i nāne. Ke inspiring communities a whole I mahi ana, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. It is really lovely to be here in Matamata today. I'm Megan, as I said, but I grew up in Ngāti. And 13 years ago, my family and I moved to Whakatū Nelson for 2 years, but we haven't got around to coming back yet. Living in Auckland was one of the best decisions that we made, and yeah, I love living in the top of the south. I'm part of this team called Inspiring Communities, and we love the work that we do connecting and supporting place-based change across Aotearoa. So we're a national community trust. There's a whole lot of tools and resources on our websites to help people get active in their place and work with councils and business and other kind of partners to make things happen. So yeah, today I just wanted to acknowledge all of you for coming, but and also acknowledge that you're probably here because you're already doing stuff in community. And I just want to thank you for everything that you do. Big pat on the back, and yeah, hopefully today just gives you a few more ideas and the reason to keep on going with this stuff, because it's not all easy all the time. It's hard work, but it's going to take all of us to get through. So yeah, let's just start with that thing called community, and I'd love to invite you to share one thing about the community that you live in with the person sitting next to you. If you know the person that you came with really well, if there's a face in the room you might not know, but yeah, introduce yourself and share one thing you love about the place that you live. One thing you love about the place that you live.
I came 2 years ago. My son was just arrived from Canada. Yeah. He was just arrived from Canada. He was very active in his country. It was a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, let's just come back together. I'm sure there's lots of cool things in your places, so let's just kind of go back to the front. What's one thing you love about your place? For me, I'm really lucky. I get to work from home and I get to look out over Tasman Bay every day. So I love the sunsets, and I love living close to the water. It's been a dream come true for me. Someone at the back, want to start us off? What do you love about your community?
It's inclusive.
It's inclusive? Nice. Awesome.
It's got a great, strong heart. It always has done, and it will continue to be.
Awesome. I love the way that the fist kind of pumped you when you talk about the heart. Awesome. What about you guys?
Well, it's the same. It's friendly, easy to get around. It's compact, not too many people,
Excellent.
but enough people.
Yeah, just the friendliness of everybody here. You know.
Awesome. Friendliness, inclusivity, accessibility, all really important, for a great life.
Active families,
Yep.
getting out and about.
Getting out and about, lots of things to do. Yep.
Wraparound support in times of need.
Nice. So when you need help, you know that there's some help there. Awesome.
We've got a passionate group of people in the community that
Awesome.
make stuff happen.
Yep. Cool. We love that.
I think you can feel a sense of community in Matamata, and it's very, very supportive.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I'm not from Matamata, but in my community, a lot of grassroots organizations helping people in need and also helping the arts. So lots of events happening that are driven from people in the community.
Great. So what's your community?
I'm visiting my mom from Canada.
From Canada. Wow, we like Canada. We love Canada.
So I've actually just come to Matamata 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But I was just saying to my son, you know, come into this tonight. I did the tower run on Friday night. I was book chatting you, however, and it's just there's things that a person can do, you know, just
Awesome. Give us things to get involved with.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm a fairly recent import too. I've only lived here just on 12 months, so I actually work in Tauranga, so
Cool.
not as involved in the community as I'd like to be just
Yep.
yet, but certainly looking for opportunities, especially going to the future.
Fantastic. What about at the frontier?
Good for my grandchildren.
Good for your grandchildren, so it's a place for not just you, but for others in the next generation?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Well, I was born and raised in a big city, and I've chosen to raise my family in a small town, and there's something about that makes it a bit easier to get involved, makes it easier to feel like you're part of it, so I love that.
Awesome.
And I was actually born in Matamata, but moved up to Auckland when I was 5 months old, and so I'm a recent Auckland escapee about 4 years ago. And
Refugees Club.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just that whole being in a small town, being able to get to places really quickly and easily, and not have to think I have to go half an hour early in case the traffic's really bad. So that and being able to park for free, things like that are really, really neat. And the reason we moved was because our family had grown up and moved off, and we were sitting there thinking, what are we still doing here? Why are we still doing this? And moved to somewhere where it's just a bit more relaxed, and so I actually live in Kairoa, somewhere where it's more relaxed and grounding and centered.
Fantastic.
I just like exploring the area, and there's lots of people who are also interested in doing that, so all the bushwalks and treks.
Getting out in the environment.
Yeah.
Awesome. There are lots of awesome parts of our community, and there's lots of things about communities all over the world that are awesome, and I just wanted to make a few connections with some of them that I've lived in along the way. So as I mentioned, I'm from the big metropolis of Ngātea over in the Hauraki Plains, and I'm a third generation butcher's daughter, and I learned all my great community development skills in the back of the butcher shop. That's where it all started. And it was a great small town to live in growing up, lots of family around, and I left home when I was 18 to go and do an AFS here in Canada, and it was the Lions Club that bought my suitcases, my set of 3, which I've still got 2 of the 3 from all those days ago, and a camera. So hugely generous, the town for me growing up. And then I moved to the other side of the world, to the prairies in Alberta, to a tiny little town called Crossfield, which was a mix of oil workers and people working on in farms, etc., in the Great Prairies. And I remember being struck by the size of landscape in Canada, the huge skies, and what I thought was flat from living in Ngātea, I learned wasn't flat, because in Canada in the prairies you can be 3 hours from the next city and still see the lights. So the scale of that landscape was amazing. Me in the 80s graduating from high school. But yeah, those skies, like what happens in Canterbury when that comes across the Alps, but just on scale. So I was amazed by the impact of landscape and what that made me feel. But also in my little town, probably 80% of the kids in my school were first or second generation Canadians. So my host family were Dutch and German, so it was all very new working out what it was to be Canadian. Came back to New Zealand, a lovely big sky, love the Chinooks. And then after university, moved to a small town to teach English in a high school in Toyama in Japan. And again, that was community at a different scale. On my second day, I remember going out for a run, and this old woman on her kind of tricycle looked at me and stared and drove straight into the drain on the side of the road. And I went over to her to try and help pull the little tricycle out, and she refused to let me help her. She was just so embarrassed and ashamed, and it was the first time that help had been turned down, and it made me think about, how does community work in this place? And I realised, because I didn't have the language and I didn't have the culture, that I had to understand things from a whole different lens. So for example, I only learned in the last few weeks before I left that the amazing hills in behind where we lived, the sign said in kanji that I couldn't read, beware of the bears. That was good to know just before I left. In my high school, there was a male teacher that I sat next to that used to ask me if I'd like coffee in the morning. And I'd say yes to be, polite. And little did I know it was 3 months later that he'd go to the next room and ask a female teacher to make the coffee and bring it back to me. He would bring it back. So there was a whole lot of stuff happening beneath the surface that I wasn't fully aware of. And watching the news at night, which was Japanese translated into English, I remember thinking, why do they do this? The lead, as they opened, was, today the grey warbler was seen in Shogawa. So they weren't marking the day by dates and calendars or news and events from what had happened in the world first. It was about what was happening in nature to make that connection. And in my growing up time, I didn't really understand fully about what all of that was meaning, and how from especially a First Nations point of view, actually that connection with the land and the environment being really important. So yeah, I feel like I've grown a lot in terms of understanding this thing called community and its many different kind of aspects. But yeah, lots to be proud of and lots to think about. But yeah, communities as we know it can be fantastic things, and they can be really challenging things. And to acknowledge those of us trying to work in communities to activate stuff, there's some hard stuff because communities have changed a lot in the last couple of decades. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of those being around, we're time poor. We don't have the time to put into community like we once did. And people are working 2 and 3 jobs to survive. There's challenges brought about by people being the consumer side of stuff. We have to, we've been told to buy lots of things, whereas in the old days there'd be one lawnmower in a street and people would share that. But now we all have to have our own piece of equipment, for example. There's another aspect that's about, I think we've traded off privacy for community. We build high fences and we have drive-in garages that we come in and close the door, so we don't see our neighbours and connections like we once did. So all of those factors together make it harder and more challenging to be in community, but community, and that's not reasons why we shouldn't think about how we can overcome those. So communities are hugely powerful, and lots that community can do inherently that other agencies can't do for us. So if we think about community, it's a group of people who identify with and support each other, and there's lots of ways of defining community. We've got communities of interest, people that like backgammon or to play polo or to do Indian cooking. And there's another group like communities of ethnicity, for example. You might be from a Bangladeshi community or a refugee background or a Hapu community, so communities of ethnicity. Over the last few years, there's heaps of online communities that people join as well. That's how they kind of sense community. So lots of different ways. Inspiring Communities, though, has taken an intentional focus on communities of place, because we think place is a really interesting geography. Place in the whenua is a really interesting way, and it's a place that people that live, care, work, invest, and whakapapa to a place can come together, where you can be a young person who's Asian, but you live in Matamata. So there's a whole lot of interconnections that happen, and when we bring all of those together in a place, it can be a really important way to actually move things forward for everyone. So there's lots of things that communities can do. Care for one another, care for the earth, prevent crime. We can keep our eyes out and to stop things from happening before they do. Social justice, democracy, there's an awful lot of things on that list. So, challenges, some real power in community, and I think moving forward it's up to all of us to think about how we recreate the connections street by street and town by town so that we can grow together as a country. So let's explore that a little bit more. One of the ways if we start at the real grassroots is at the kind of neighbourhood level. And international disaster research tells us that within the first 24 hours of a disaster, whether it be flood or fire or whatever, the help you're most likely to see is going to come from within 1 kilometre of where you live. So the people around you are really important. And knowing in advance who's got a generator, who's got a barbecue, who's got a supply of home baking or fruit and stuff that we can all share, knowing those things in advance sets communities up in quite a different way. Neighbours Aotearoa was created back in about 2009-10 as a way to kind of grow neighbourliness in New Zealand. Has anyone heard of Neighbours Day? A couple of people? Yeah, lots of head shakes. So it's a national campaign that's on the go right now for the month of March. There's events and connections. I know my street events next week, all over the country, to just bring neighbours together and connect. It's a great wee vehicle. On their website they've got lots of information about how to make those connections, because it's quite hard if you don't know your neighbours and you're scared or you've never done it before to take those first steps. So there's lots of things that we can do in the neighbourhood level. And a couple of examples of that. For me, Neighbours Day was kind of like because it was happening right across the country, it gave me the license to say, I'm doing something for Neighbours Day, and I went and talked to neighbours in my street and the new places where I've lived to help make those connections. So over the years, my family and I have been part of with other neighbours, using chalk to kind of do up stuff on the cycleway. And yeah, the kids actually after that one day there kept putting, we left the chalk out and the drawings kept going for the rest of the week till it rained quite heavily and it disappeared. And neighbourhood little gatherings in the park. Neighbours gatherings that are in neutral spaces like parks and reserves are really important because it's not anyone's, it's kind of all of ours, so they're really important. That little bit there, we had about 50, 60 neighbours that afternoon, just for a cup of tea, bring a chair, etc., bring some kai to share. One of the neighbours had actually bought a defibrillator for the whole street rather than put it in his house for his sick wife. He offered to put it out for everyone to kind of use, but we needed to know how to use it. So yeah, so some great little examples of small things that we can kind of all do. So Neighbours Day again, like one of these barbecues, things in the park, the gatherings in the park, the afternoon tea, my daughter overheard other people talking about little libraries. And there had been a few that had jumped up in our town, and she said to her father afterwards, Dad, we could do that. How about it? Full disclosure, I'm big on community. My husband is an environmental planner who likes to make rules for things that we can't do, and the community stuff is still getting his head around. So his first response was, they'll probably put dog poos in it, and it'll probably get trashed, so kind of why would we? So just to acknowledge that, often that is the first response for some people. My daughter, though, was a great advocate and got him on the task. And away they went to the recycle centre, and for $5 they bought some plywood and a pot lid and some test pots, and our little library was created. And to acknowledge that across the country now, men's sheds are doing a great job of building this little bit of infrastructure. There's an amazing website where you get all sorts of design ideas. They all look so amazing and different. And things like, fridges that are community pantries. There's a whole lot of things at a neighbourhood level that we can do to share and to make things go around. So the good news is that there's never been any dog turds. It hasn't been trashed, and 7 years later, it just looks after itself. So books turn over all the time, just quietly. It belongs to everyone. It just happens to be on our front porch. So there's something about doing things that are small, and one thing leading to another, that are really important, and the connections between people within there. And there's this notion, a big word people use called active citizenship, that I just wanted to start to unpack a little bit. So I love the work that Vivian Hutchinson and the thinking that he's done over many years, because he challenges us to think about not blaming others for what's wrong, but think about what our part of that puzzle is. The individual awakening of citizenship is a critical element in how our communities develop, because this awakening involves figuring out just which part of making things better has got your name on it. So it's about acknowledging that we can all be change makers, we've all got a part to play in this, and it can happen in lots of different ways. I love some of Vivian's thinking because he's based in Taranaki, and he's done a lot of work in thinking and brought people together in his place, because he believes that communities have forgotten how to talk to each other. We kind of go in our own little rugby silos and our art silos and our school silos, and all these silos forget to join up and have conversations together. And actually when we're together, we can actually make connections and support each other and think about what next for all of our place together. And they've invested in Process Active Citizenship Masterclasses to actually bring people together to have conversations, including getting stuck into things like decolonisation and what is the Māori history of this place and what's our role here as Pākehā. Some real tough conversations that they're actually using to build connections, build relationships. Because when you've got relationship, you get rid of perception about people and you can have some conversations. So yeah, building that capacity and that muscle is really important. But let's dig a bit deeper. What is active citizenship? It has a whole lot of different components. And they start with the one that we often know, the voting, whether that's be through your council election or community boards or the school board of trustees or on a group or committee. And equally, the people that actually put their hands up bravely to take up those positions and to be voted by their peers. So there's the voting element that we're all familiar with. Then there's kind of the casual trade side. There's a cause that you hear about that you want to give some money to. Or increasingly now, communities are finding other ways to contribute their wealth. For example, with time banks around the country. I'm really good at typing. Is it David? David is really good at gardening. I'm not good at gardening. My hour and his hour are worth exactly the same. We can trade. So we can use the skills and the talents that we've got with no money to actually, hi David, how are you? I'm Megan, blah, blah, blah. We build connection and community, but we also support each other to get the things that we all need to live our best lives. So, casual trade. There's the volunteer side of stuff, and sometimes we formally volunteer when there's a call that goes out for help. And there's also just the quiet things that we do to help people, as we know, so it's got the formal and informal sides too. On the other side there, we've got the consulted citizen, and that's about, when people ask us for our thoughts and opinions, and whether we kind of say, yep, I'll tell you what I think, or I'll share my ideas, or I'll come to that meeting. Again, it's actually the democratic role that we all play in terms of participating that way. Good neighbours, we've talked a little bit about how we support those living in close to you. And then there's the community group members. So that's about, I'm part of the knitting club or the book chat, and I come along and that's how I support and connect and grow community that way. The next one on the list there is community-led action. So this is kind of thinking about, I've got an idea, I want to do something, and then you find another couple of people in your community that think the same, and together you might do a little project together. It might be a really big project, or it could be something quite small, but again, putting your hands up to do some of the doing. And there's another one that's fallen off there that I forgot to put on my break this afternoon, which is around kind of activism. We actually, people that stand up for other people, that are passionate about social and environmental justice, and organise the rallies. Sometimes we go to the rallies. We don't want family violence in our community, so there's an activism component to that too. So active citizenship isn't just about voting, it's about a whole range of activity, and we don't have to do all of it, but what might be the little bits that we can do to make our communities better places. So when we have lots of active citizens, we have strong communities. What we've also been learning that personal well-being and community well-being are also really closely connected. So some research from the States in 2014 did a study on 5,000 Americans with no known heart problems, and found that with a good support network, they had a 22% less risk of dying of a heart attack, of having a heart attack. So again, if you've got those connections, less stress in your life, you feel supported, it's good for your health. Similarly, when they looked after the big Chicago heat waves at two adjoining neighbourhoods, they found that the mortality rate of one suburb was 7 times higher than the other one. When they dug deeper to understand what was behind that, again, it was about neighbourhood connections. Because when the fire hydrants got kicked down and because people wanted water, and the power wasn't working because there were so many coolers going that blew the power, people knew who was living in the apartment buildings above them and that they needed to get water to the older people, etc., because they couldn't get down to access the fire hydrants. So that small thing of knowing who needed help was the difference in mortality rate between those two places. Again, knowing who's around you, a really, really important thing. And again, here in New Zealand, the Youth and Child Wellbeing Strategy that was done a couple of years ago. Yes, there's lots of work in terms of child health and outcomes and wellbeing that's about services and supports for families, but actually it's also about the wider environment that young people grow up in, and the connections and their sense of community and belonging, and the wider support for families within that as well. So lots of reasons for the interconnection between the self and the broader we. This is one of my favourite quotes from Margaret Mead. Is it hot in here or is it just me? I just want to ask that question because it could be just well me. Just wanted to check. Everyone else is fine? Okay, good. I just wanted to double check. One of my favourite quotes from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So when we kind of move from neighbourhood to kind of town kind of level and we start to join up across citizens, a whole lot of other stuff becomes much more possible too. Huge power and collaboration that can make a real big difference. So when I talk about community-led development, for me that's about collaboration. It has residents at the centre, but actually there's an interdependence with all the other agencies and business and hapu and iwi and stuff around in terms of that place that we need to bring together and have that collective leadership approach. And I wanted to share a few stories of communities across the Motu that have been doing some amazing things. So I want to also say that the stories I'm going to share don't belong to Inspiring Communities. They come from the hard graft of many hundreds of people where in the places that they are. This particular one's Mangakino. And we've been involved with some of them, but not all. But what needs to be shared is the work that they've been doing to inspire us and to give us little lessons and tips and sparks to keep this thing going. So good ideas can come from anywhere and they all deserve to be shared. So community-led development looks really different in different places. It has different drivers, different starters, different ways of working, and here's a few of them. So sometimes it's a national aspiration that gets lived locally, like predator-free Aotearoa, a big vision to get rid of stoats and rats and mustelids and possums across New Zealand so that our biodiversity can thrive. It's also being lived there's over 2,000 local predator-free groups now across the country that are actually interpreting that big vision, doing things in their way to kill the stuff, killing the predators, but also building community in the process and thinking about what else they do in their neighbourhoods. They might start on setting traps, but then it leads to community events and a whole bunch of other things, building that social capital. So that's one way example. Sometimes it can be a placemaking approach, initiated by councils and supported by community organisations, then again connecting with local residents. So here's an example from Porirua in Fantame Street. You can see it's a pretty run-down little neglected neighbourhood block there that they've done some amazing work in over the last few years. And it's not what they've done, but it's how that they've done it to go from there to there, which is the key. So what they did is that they brought together 14 people from the neighbourhood and trained them with skills in facilitation engagement and got them to go out and do the engagement with those in their neighbourhood. And they formed a little team called the Engine Room, and they then worked with the local council experts to bring together a little plan for that, the Fantame shops. And they thought about what they might like to trial, and through an approach that involved the communities also building some of the infrastructure. If you look at those blue lines there, I think you can see them. Oh no, you can't in this one. So rather than just getting people's voice and perspective, they were also involved in choosing the things they wanted to pilot. And they had a neighbourhood party day at the end of all of this work to test out which bits of the temporary infrastructure that they created would work. So the interesting bit is that often this reverses what lots of councils do when they bring in consultants, create a plan and then take it out for consultation. How can we, if we actually want to build community, involve communities early as part of that process to co-design? Because actually there's two lots of expertise that's really important. Context expertise and content expertise. Now town planners like my husband have a huge role to play and they know an awful lot. People that know about funding, people that know about planning, people know about how to build houses. But people that live in Fantame Street know how that neighbourhood functions, where people go, what's happened before, who comes and goes, what the real needs are, and how to bring people together. So they have a knowledge about their place that the content experts don't. Residents can't do some of this stuff on their own, we need both. So bringing together the best of content and context and valuing each other's skills in this process is really, really key as we move forward. And I'm really excited by some of the pride in place approach that this council's taking to try and find some new ways of working to do cool things in your towns as well. So I think it's really exciting. Sometimes though, it's not a little project that gets done, it's trying to enable a big dream. So in Aportiki, the community there, which is one of our poorest in the country, for the last 20 years, led by the iwi and the council, have been trying to find a way to change their social economic outcomes. And they've looked to the sea, back to Tangaroa, their natural asset, and over a lot of time and a lot of money, they've now got 8 kilometres offshore, 3,000 metres down, 3 k's down, 175 mussel lines that are generating now local jobs because they've managed to redevelop their harbour so that the mussels didn't go to Tauranga, they came back into Aportiki. In 2017, they had their first 3 jobs, there's over 300 now. That also created pressure on housing. They had to do a whole of skills development to get people with skills to come back into the town, and then housing was a problem too. They've partnered with the iwi and the school to actually build some houses. So again, thinking about the response that communities can take to actually fix some of these problems too. Long time work here in Aportiki, 2 decades worth. I remember when we were involved in some discussions in Wellington around some of the things that Aportiki was doing. the look on ministers' face when they realised that this community had been working on this for 10 years and they didn't even know anything about it. So huge power in places to change things if we can get that collective action right. I love what's happening in Paihia too. Hands up, have you been to Paihia in the last kind of 5 or 6 years? A few of you, yeah. So they've got a really cool story too. So in the far north, the local kind of businesses and residents in town there thought that it was all getting really run down, and they were sick of waiting for the council to come with upgrade money. So they got together and they did a community visioning exercise and created a master plan for their village, and then worked with the council and the roading agencies, because they're on a state highway as well, to actually work out how they could create a different way of working. They were prepared to put their hands in as community members and get digging and get busy, and so they did. So their first, one of their first projects to redevelop the waterfront area there, they brought in $180,000 worth of investment, 9,000 person hours, and alongside the council and others, created about a $1.3 million redevelopment plan. So the 1 + 1 = 5 stuff really can start to add value. They've done some really cool stuff over that time. Another little example in terms of community infrastructure makeover, they had some of the worst public toilets, voted the worst public toilet in New Zealand. They did an amazing 7-day little makeover with everyone bringing their gifts and assets and dreams to that little place, and the toilet after that 7-day period looked quite different. And they've actually got contracts with the council to maintain and to clean the toilets. That's been one of their little income streams. They've got an op shop as well. That's now, they've bought the building as well as run the business. So they've got a stake, and that helps generate some income. They get grants and donations. There's a targeted rate. And they also distribute funding that they generate, self-generate, to other groups and things in their town. So they've got a bigger picture than just the town centre. It's a really good one to watch. And I love this year, Paihia keeps on going. I can't believe the volunteer contribution in this place, from local businesses and tradies as well as local people. So there was a reserve at the end of town when you just come into Paihia that had got really run down, and they had lots of social issues there. They did a workshop design about what they could do about it, and a local resident put up $100,000 to help develop the playground and the park. Council upgraded the toilets because that was in their plan. But again, 1 + 1 = 7, and everyone can work together. My little hometown of Ngatea in the Hauriki Plains is something that I'm really proud of as well. So one of the first smallest places in the country to get an artificial hockey turf back in the 90s, when everyone else was still in mud. The Dunedins and the Hamiltons and others didn't even have some of these facilities. So there's been a kind of we can do this stuff if we really want to mentality that's been there for a long time. Towards the end of the century, some challenges for local dairy farmers in getting staff. And the young people that were coming in to work in farms not lasting because they didn't have the skills, and they also got frustrated because they didn't like the work. There was something that was amiss there. So there was a kind of town meeting of about 100 or so farmers in the school and others, and they pulled together a bit of a plan and a program for how they could change some of that. So farmers put their hands up to be trainers, and then they reached out to the wider community, shoulder tapped a whole lot of farmers, generated $1 million, and actually bought a small farm close to the school that would be the training grounds. So move on a couple of decades, the Hauraki Trust that supports that bought a second dairy farm, now currently milking about 320 cows in Waitakaruru, and some of the money from that bigger farm now supports the school's operations and extra things that they can't afford to do. But the academy has now got 180 kids registered in it, and there's demand, waiting list from local farmers to get these cadets because they're coming out with the right skills. So again, a local idea about how you get what you want, use your assets, and think creatively about how else you can get that done. Small towns can do cool things. So Pai Kakariki, I think this is a cool story too. So it started with one family who was going to lose their house. She was a valued teacher aide at the school with local kids, and others were really mortified that she was going to have to leave. So 30 people in Pai Kakariki pooled their money to buy a house for this woman so that she could stay. With paying back some interest, there was a 5-year period coming back from that, that she had to pay some money back by, and they supported her to be able to buy the property. And that started them on a journey about what can we do to support housing crisis in our little town. They've also now got a little small rental stock that they manage, And they don't just manage the house, they support the whole family, so the village supporting the family. And they're doing things like working with the council and others to have discussions about intensification and some of the scary things that are hard conversations. So again, you know, from small things, some amazing things can grow. But what about you? You know, lots of stories there. What jumps out for you in some of the stories that I've shared? What are you hearing behind there? How might some of these things happen? What might be the ingredients?
I think it's just being courageous, isn't it?
Courageous. There's a hell of a lot of courage in there. Yep, absolutely. What else?
People getting out of their comfort zone and mixing with other people.
Yep, absolutely.
And extending themselves to learn new skills, maybe.
Yep, and finding new resources through those connections. Absolutely. What else?
It's like you were saying before, it was that which part of making things better has your name on it. So it's stepping up, isn't it? And you see a lot on Facebook if you're on any of the community pages. Moan, groan, grizzle.
Yep.
First world problems, folks, and then no one actually prepared to step up and say, actually, we've got the power to change this ourselves.
Absolutely. I remember I talked to Peter, who's the chair of Focus Pai here, about 3 months ago, and I said, so why do you guys do what you do? And he said, it's simple. We care. We love Pai here. We want to see this place go forward, and we're all prepared to put our time in. So, yeah. But what's that catalytic factor that helps move some of those things from moaning about it into doing? That's the key bit here. Oh, thank you. Any other things from people that jumped out for you in any of those stories that you'd like to?
Must be a feeling of pride at the end of it, to see what you
going to say
achieved.
joy.
And
just
to know that it's been something that you maybe thought wasn't going to succeed in, and you look back at what you have achieved, and the community comes together and gives you their approval, I guess, and celebrates it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can see some of the physical changes in some of these places, and they're pretty dramatic. They're pretty cool. There's something about that seeing is believing that actually helps the next people get involved, and you think, for me, my work in community development, the question I always listen for is, what are we going to do next? That's my success factor question, because that shows me you're kind of, people can see that change is possible, they've done something and they want to do something else.
It's that sense of empowerment too, isn't it? Like you say, the joy at the end of it, but then also knowing that that's part of the what next, because now we know we can do it. But then also there's that pride, like if you've given something, it's far less likely that you're going to feel enough pride in it to keep it up to scratch, or to maintain it. Whereas if you've actually put the mahi in yourself, then like you say, people care. You care more about things that you've actually put your own sweat hours into.
Absolutely. In Pai here, there's a lady that the one thing that she does for her place is that she weeds a particular garden in a main street, and that's her job. She says, I do that. I don't want accolades. I don't want anyone to. Apparently, she gets really embarrassed when people say thank you. So sometimes, that kind of, I created it. It's my job to keep it looking good. I want to keep it looking good. That intrinsic goodness that comes from that being really, really important. With watching community work across the country in the last 20 years here, we've pulled out 5 kind of key principles around community-led change. That we can kind of see in lots of those stories and echo the comments that you just made. The first one is local vision, like people that have collectively said this is what we want to do, and then you can get in behind. It's not someone else's vision from outside, it's come from within, so that makes a big difference. The second one, building from strengths and assets. Communities have amazing resource that we often don't think about. We think about funders being those people over there, but how can we kind of, support both with our hands and our deeds and our putia, our money, different ways. And again, collaboration, it actually requires stepping out and having conversations with those that you don't normally talk to, because that frees up resources, but it also frees up new opportunities as well, because we can't do this stuff alone. The fourth one is around collaborative local leadership, and to acknowledge that how communities are already full of leaders, but often we're working in silos. So how we join some of that stuff up so that we're better together, being really key. And thinking about leadership not as the people just who chair the committees or are on the council, important though they are, Actually, leadership is the people that actually go around and organise little neighbourhood events or tend gardens or look after the kids in their street or keep an eye out what's happening. Leadership happens in lots of different forms. It's just not the people that have this title called chair or president. So thinking of us all as leaders being really important. And the last one that we've learned is really important is this notion of learning by doing. Being courageous, as was mentioned, and giving some stuff a go. Because we don't know what's going to work to fix the stuff that's really hard, because if we'd known, we would have done it 20 years ago. But what we do know is that taking small steps and actually actively learning from what worked and didn't work as you take your next one is really important. We also know that plans are important, but they're only a guide to get you started. So traditional management planning, you plan the work and then you work the plan. But if you're engaging with lots of different people and collaborating and finding out who's got this, you're not going to know how you're going to achieve what you need until you actually get started. So we have to have a notion of kind of being adaptive and being flexible, seeing what comes up. You all take 3 steps and 2 back. But actually intentionally learning as part of what we're doing is really important in terms of getting change. So what else helps? What else helps? And why does this work matter? Because this is the bit, like, why do we do this? Why should we bother? What we can see across the country too is that when we've got people in place connected and we've got that collaboration happening, the places that are generated work better for everyone there. There's something for the kids that are teenagers, because the teenagers have been involved in talking about what they want and need. Similarly with older people, similarly with our parks, similarly with local jobs. It's like our place works for our people. The solutions haven't been parachuted in. Resource efficiency. With your basket in mind, no te rero, naku te rero, ka ora ai te iwi, with your basket in mind, the people will flourish. It's like, yeah, gosh, I didn't know that you did that and you've got a room over there and oh, you know that people, when you can bring these together, the maths really starts to add up. And it's not all about money. Sometimes it's about mana. Sometimes it's about the connections that you've got. Sometimes it's about knowing the history. Sometimes it's about having information. Sometimes it's about having data. Sometimes it's about having money, but it's how all of those things come together that help the forward journey. Building social capital, connection and community. What we've learned is kind of what we talked about before, is that communities that have, if you work in a community building way and growing your neighbourhood connections, you're building your resilience for when those crisis moments occur. So in terms of prevention for the things that are coming, there's huge advantages in getting organised and building those connections. Enduring solutions. This is really important too, because international research tells us that moving the big things like violence and long-term unemployment and things like that in a place, 10 to 14 years. So it's beyond 3-year political cycles, and sometimes it's beyond our kind of energy levels too. So how we create movements of people and have lots of people involved so that if one person leaves, it doesn't fall over. Who's seen that in community before? The key person leaves and then it stops. Yeah. But if we've got lots of people involved, the chances of that falling over reduce. So again, thinking about, community being part of this. Iwi've been here forever and will continue to be here for an awful long time. So again, thinking about those partnerships and the long-term view. And you're working in ways that unleash local capacity. The amazing things happen in our country. We bought beaches a few years ago over a summer campaign with those 2 guys, remember they had in their garage, they were doing with their cardboard signs, get in behind, and we did. In Ekatahuna, when they were about to lose their Foursquare, community got in behind, bought that, and the petrol station. They floated local debentures, worked with a couple of community funders to bring those facilities back into community ownership so they weren't lost. In Rakiura, they have built not 1 but 2 multi-million-dollar facilities in the last 15 years. And what else? In Chicago, there's a Blair Vining, the Southlander, who died of cancer because he couldn't get services enough, kick-started his wife and a whole lot of others into creating a new charity hospital down there to try and improve access for people that need those services. So again, lots of capacity if we actually recognise it, value it and enable it. The how we do this stuff is the tough stuff. It's not the what we do, it's the how as ever. And there's a few things I'd like to share before I finish that seem to make a big difference. And I'd like to acknowledge Jim Deers, who's a great guy from the States, from out of Seattle. who's done a lot of work in matched funding, changing actually communities when they contribute and councils contribute, actually the funding pool gets bigger and bigger. We've brought Jim out to New Zealand a few times, and matched funds across the country have taken off over the last kind of 10 years. And it's great to see a new fund here in Matamata-Piako that also enables community-led action, which I know others are going to talk about shortly. So 2 mindsets. Consultation mindset. Ask people what they want and deliver it for them. The empowerment or community building mindset. Ask people what they want and help them do it. Now there's times where we need to just kind of deliver for, but actually if we want to change the notion of active citizenship, that we can all have a role in playing parts of our futures. We just don't want to receive and moan that we want to be active. Working with people in different kind of ways is really important. So 4 key things in terms of community building that makes a difference. Starting not with your problems and what you want to fix, but what's your dream and your aspiration, the think big stuff that we can all get in behind. Rather than just think about what you need, what's your bigger dream? It's interesting we talk about poverty, and I would argue that poverty of hope and spirit in this country is as big a problem as the poverty of the money in some cases. And in lots of really hard hit communities, actually the first step that lots of people are talking about is we actually need to help people to dream again. Really kind of basic stuff, but actually we've forgotten when it's been known really, really tough how to dream. But it's a really uniting way because everyone wants a better life. Make it fun. Don't call meetings if you can have parties. On the West Coast, the Kawatiri Trail Builders down there have built 100 or so kilometres of bike trails, and they have 1 meeting a year. They do their meetings while they're building the tracks as part of the work. So there's lots of ways of mixing things up in terms of making it fun for people. Starting where people are. Again, you don't have to have a meeting in a building. People are at the local dairies. People hanging out, watching a rugby game on Saturdays. Might be in a restaurant or a bar or a cafe in town. Think of all the places where communities are and go out to them. And strive together. Find some small things that are visible that you can see to get some results. One of my favourite stories that brings all of those keys together, I think, is from a pony in the hut. And this little guy called Dion was a school student at a Puni Primary, and the Common Unity Project that's done some amazing work, community building work in their place, talk with the kids about what their vision for their big empty school playground was. Dion wanted a bike park, and he knew where the humps should go and what the track should look like, and they priced it all up, and it was going to cost 30 grand. And in a place like a Puni, that doesn't make it very possible to get started. And I would argue in lots of communities, people see what it might cost and they stop there. But when you think about what you've got and how you can activate it in different ways, more becomes possible. So what did they have there? Actually, in this community, most of the dads were labourers. So they spoke to their employers, and they got a whole lot of trucks of fill diverted from landfill to the school. And they got permission to use lots of the big machinery that the dads knew how to use on the weekend. And the dads came together, and there was working bees over a couple of weekends, and the dream of Dion's bike park was created, and it didn't cost $30,000. It led to a whole lot of cool stuff that's happening around biking in that community. They've got bike sheds and recycling of bikes, and teach a kid how to bike, to bike, and a whole lot of stuff. But my favourite part of this story is about the dads. Because the dads in this community didn't come to school interviews. They didn't come through those school gates because they'd had real bad experiences of what school was like for them. But when they could come and do it with their shovels and their picks and do what they knew how to do, and they could bring their kids with them, and their kids could see their dads doing stuff, there was a fundamental change in terms of some of the relationships in that community. So for me, the dads being part of this was the biggest success story. So just finally, what makes a difference in this space? The old Nike adage, just start. If you've got a good idea, keep it small, keep it doable, and have lots of conversations. Talk to lots of people, see what they think, and listen. Often we get really good at talking, but we forget the listening bit. And there's, in that kind of space of conversation and making room for others to view their thoughts, there's a real important notion of powerful questions. Not all questions are created equal. When we ask closed questions, do you want the black chair or the white chair? It's a yes, no. And it's quite a tight, short conversation. But when we ask, if we kind of move up this creative continuum, so to speak, When should we bring the chairs in for the meeting? Who might come to the meeting? How might we get them there? Why would they come to this meeting? It starts to open up a whole lot of different conversations. So the closed questions, the yes, no, are easier. The did, can, will, which. But actually these questions start to enable imagination and dreaming and some wider conversations. And if you listen, you can see what other people are actually really interested in and how your idea can connect with theirs. Yeah, there's lots of questions. Could do a whole hour on powerful questions. Be intentional. Identify collective goals and aspirations, because again, when things get hard in your project or what you're doing, what unites you is what you set out to achieve. So having that kind of crystal vision that everyone's on board with is really important. And getting creative, do things that are outside of the square, and help your community to understand the bits of the community that are hidden that not everyone sees. When we do asset mapping in communities, it amazes me that I know about these 5 things over here, but actually Sharon over here told me about those 4 things, and I didn't know that they even existed. When we join up all that information and knowledge, things can really start to hum and we can connect it up that way. Because you can't activate your assets if you haven't connected them first. Do something visible, do it together with others that we've talked about. Grow leaders, find ways for you not to have to do everything. That's the other big key. Don't think about, yes, I can do this, but who else could do this? Step aside and create some room for someone else to step in and do that wee task. And find ways to engage people who may have been excluded and don't get the chance to participate. How do we get out to the people that are homebound? How do we get out to the kids that actually are labelled as bad and hard to reach and troublesome? How do we engage with people that we don't normally? Share stories, learn and celebrate. Take those small moments and take those small wins and do more parties, I reckon, because actually change not noticed isn't changed. So when the more we can make things visible along the way, the better it is for everyone. I'm going to pause there and just to open up the space if anyone's got any questions. And we've also got a couple of folks from the council who are going to share some of the stuff that's happening in your place too.